I'm Sarah Brown, and this is The Mothers, real conversations with leaders, creators, and thinkers about who we are, what we want, and how we build meaningful lives alongside motherhood. Lately, I've been thinking about the idea of a full life. Not the one on LinkedIn, not the one on my dear friend Instagram, the real one. The one happening at the kitchen table at 6:30 p.m. when everyone's hungry, someone's melting down, and you're still trying to answer emails while figuring out what's for dinner. Because for many women right now, the question isn't just, what do I want to achieve? It's something harder. What kind of life is actually possible? My guest today, Dr. Nicole Mason, has spent her entire career studying that question. Nicole grew up in significant poverty in Los Angeles, raised by a single mother. She went on to earn a PhD in political science and became one of the country's leading voices on women, poverty, and economic security. She later became president and CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research, one of Washington, D.C.'s most influential think tanks, and the youngest person and first woman of color to lead the organization. Today, she is the founding president of Future Forward Women, a policy network focused on building women's political and economic power. But Nicole's life didn't follow the straight line we often imagine success requires. In her early 30s, she decided to have kids on her own, welcoming boy-girl twins through IVF while leading one of the country's most prominent policy organizations. And motherhood, certainly single motherhood, forced a question she had spent years studying from the outside. Is the system actually built for women to succeed in it? Because when Nicole had children, she suddenly felt, acutely and personally, the absence of something fundamental in America: childcare. The infrastructure that makes a full life possible. Which raises another question. When women leave corporate or institutional careers to build something more flexible, we often call that a choice. But was it really a choice? Or was it the only reasonable way to live? In this conversation, Nicole and I talk about power. Who gets to define it? We talk about persistence and resilience, about the complicated tension between encouraging women to rise within existing systems, while knowing also how often those systems will fail them. And about what it means to build a career, a family, and a life on your own terms. Before we begin, Nicole and her team have just launched a new bipartisan study called Shaping Power, Shaping the Future, examining the experiences of women elected officials in state government. If you know or are a woman serving in state office, we've included a link in the episode description where you can participate. And now, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Nicole Mason. From a lot of the women that we speak with, something that seems to be a superpower for them, that kind of gives them a little extra energy to do everything, is that they have a sense of what they actually really want, both professionally and kind of how they want their whole life to look. And that sense of clarity seems to be a source of power and energy. So I'm really curious how people come to figure that out. I think you, from what I've read about you, you have kind of an interesting way that you reach that point of clarity, or if you, maybe you would say now today you don't feel as clear. I don't know. But could you talk about that progression towards, the little girl that was asked, what do I want to do when I grow up, to now Nicole running your own organization in the world of women, gender, racial equity? I'd love to hear.
It was a really winding road. I think the only thing I knew very early on was that I wanted to be a writer. So I wanted to write, and I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I wanted to help people. So those are the two things that I knew from very early on. But I actually, as you pointed out, had really no path, there wasn't anybody that I saw around me that was on a similar path. Um, Even when I was watching TV, everything, the people I saw on TV seemed so far away. They seemed like they were just so different from me. And so I really had to figure out how to carve out my own path. And uh, get there, whatever, wherever where was, to figure out like how to get there, and how to trust my own instinct, intuition, and know, deep down that a door was going to open,
Mhm.
and I would get what I needed, and that's always been the case, for me. Even when I, for example, got accepted to Howard University, I had no idea how I was going to pay for it, and I was living in Las Vegas, and there was a counselor that I worked with in California, and I went to her. I took a 4-hour Greyhound bus to California, stood in her doorway and said, you have to help me." And she made
Mhm.
one phone call and I received a full tuition merit scholarship to Howard University. And it's
Mhm.
those kind of moments that where I think, um, luck meets preparation. So I was really
Mhm.
prepared for, the next chapter and what was gonna open up for me, and it did, and that's been the case, all along the way.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I think about my path, I'm not one of those people who believes that, you have to have everything worked out from the very beginning. You have to, write it down, although I do write a lot down, but
Yeah.
I think you just have to, keep moving. Um
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me more about this feeling that everyone has in their own way, I think. This um I feel like an outsider or a little bit of this imposter syndrome or who am I to think I could do that or in different ways, some like more significant than others, like those people don't look like me or those the people that I look to that are doing those things aren't me. How did you for yourself come to believe that you belonged? And then are there lessons from that experience that you could share with us?
So that's really a really good and big question. So I a couple actually it's almost 10 years now. I did a TED talk on the gift of being difficult.
Yes.
And so when they ask you to do a TED talk, they ask you to talk about something that you know, and so you mine your life to figure out what that thing is. And what I landed on is what I did my talk on, which was the gift of being difficult and why, um, and what it means, and sort of reframing it, especially for women, because it's about asking for more than what you believe you deserve or other people believe that you deserve, walking through a door that was meant to be closed to you for whatever reason. And women, Black women, women of color, people of color are not expected to do that, and when they do, they are considered difficult. So when I think about, what's gotten me to here, it's that, like, being unwilling to place those limits on myself and also, um, working with people, in my life and in my work to do the same, like rejecting
Mm-hmm.
those limits and really believing like, why not? Why not me? But I would be less than honest and truthful if I didn't say that there were moments, and people have said, you know, flat out, like, who do you think you are? In so many
Mm-hmm.
words, or where do you think you're going? Or, and, figuring out how to quiet that
Mm-hmm.
and not allow that to interfere with my bigger goal or where I want to go.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What do you say to yourself in those moments? Because what you said was pretty harsh. Well, people literally saying like, "Well, you can't be that," and I imagine that may have happened significantly as you were growing up. So I'm just curious how you built the resilience to move through those things versus kind of internalizing that commentary.
Well, I think that for me, when, and again, like you said, it started from very early on. Um, this idea about who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to want to be bigger than where you are right now?
Yeah.
And I think for most women who achieve big things and go on to have an impact, you learn along the way to block it out, dull that noise, and the voice, your internal voice, becomes louder than that voice.
Mm.
And even like when I have a setback or I feel defeated, um, I just take a beat and then go back in, because I do believe like persistence and keep your willingness and ability to get back up and go back in is how you win, is how you
Hmm.
get to where you want to go. And I remember telling myself in my early 20s, I said, well, if you keep at it, it has to work. Something has to, you have to get there.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of been how I've been able to block it out and, again, just keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is there for you? Or how has it changed over time? I'm curious.
Well, there, let's that's that, again, when you were talking about like some women, have a plan and they, have a clear vision for themselves. I would say I had an outline of a vision,
Yeah.
a skeleton of a vision, and everything else was just trial and error. Like I decided to become a single mother by choice. I had no idea of what that really meant. I had no idea what it really meant to be a mother, and a mother that is conscientious and raising, whole children, and they have all their needs met. I had no
Mm.
idea. Um, I just was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna research it,
Yeah.
um, and I think the willingness to say I don't know what I
Mm.
don't know,
Yeah.
and to find out whatever that information is, whether it's by connecting with other people, reading, watching, observing, you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I obviously want to talk about motherhood and decisions to become a mother. Just wanted to round out. So, high level, you end up at this New York Women's Foundation, and then you go on to be president, CEO of the Women's Policy of the Institute for Women's Policy Research, youngest person maybe ever to lead that organization, and which is no small feat. And then moved on to found your own organization. Um, when along this, when did you start to think maybe I want to have children? And then how did you possibly do that alongside running these organizations in significant ways?
So again, this is such a great. I love like sort of talking to you and reflecting. So
Yeah.
I remember I was living in DC and I decided to move to New York.
Hmm.
I was like, I've had enough. Everybody in their 20s should live in New York at least once. So
Yeah.
I go to New York and start working at this organization called the National Council for Research on Women. And it's a big job there. I'm their first director of policy. And I mean, I'm in my early 30s, and I remember saying to my friends, we used to go to this bar we call the Southern Office because it was like right below our office.
Nice.
Uh,
Oh, I
and
love that.
and I remember telling my girlfriends, I said, I'm gonna get pregnant and I'm gonna do it by myself. And they were like, she must be drunk. Like she cannot be serious right now.
Yeah.
And then they, after a few months of continuing to talk about it, they're like, okay, we got to take this seriously. And then right when I was deciding to do that, I got this really big job at NYU running a research center, my
Hmm.
first big research center. And it was sort of a ragtag sort of center that they let me have, which usually happens.
Hmm.
They let me have because nobody could grow it. And so I
Hmm.
was tasked with sort of growing this research center. At that time, and right at that time, I said, well, if you don't do this in terms of becoming a mother, when are you going to do it? You're
Mm.
never going to have enough time. You're never going to have enough money. And so I did a, took on this really big job and decided to become a mother. And the last thing I'll say is that, of course, I did IVF. And so sometimes IVF can take years. And so, but I did IVF the first cycle, I got pregnant with twins.
Hmm.
So I didn't even have a long runway to plan. I knew
Yeah.
nothing, not even about childcare in New York City, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, you know, really, again, I'm a very, many mothers are very resourceful, and also I'm very tenacious and persistent. So really said, okay, well, this is my life now. So let me figure this out. And that's what I did.
Yeah, yeah. I am curious if I can ask, like, coming from a circumstance where your parent, from what I understand, difficult relationship with your own mother, challenging relationship with any form of parent. I'm curious where the instinct, when did this idea of like, I want to be a mother? As someone, I also never, I have to say, I never was like writing on a board of life, things to do in life. Let's become a mother or
Right.
let's have kids. But I'm curious. Some people have had that experience and said that we've interviewed, and we're like, I never wanted to have kids because I didn't kind of want to do that to them, or my fear was that that would happen to them. Um, I'm curious if that was that ever in your mind, or how did you come to that real decision and belief?
Well, I you know, I mean, in my early 20s, which I think most women are sort of ambivalent about motherhood. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these trad wives are like, I want my motherhood. No, that wasn't my
Yeah.
sort of scenario. Um, it wasn't until probably my late 20s I started to think about motherhood and how I wanted my life to be. Like, did I imagine myself with children and grandchildren, and what did a full life look like for me? And
Yeah.
a full life for me looked like children.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it did, and I had, because when from a very, in my 20s, I was surrounded by these really powerful women, many of them who chose not to have children.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one woman I talked to who regretted it. And nobody, she was talking about it, but nobody at the table, we were at a big dinner party, nobody was paying attention to her, but I was. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought to myself, I don't want to do that. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to in 20 years have regrets about not doing it because I love my job, and I'm a feminist and who cares? I was like, no, I want to be very thoughtful and deliberate. So, but when you mention like my family and my upbringing, I have found motherhood very healing.
Mm.
And I've broken generational cycles, and it feels really good. So, um, and there have been times when I've been mothering, or I have a one boy, one girl, uh, where I will remember myself at the same age that they
Mm.
were, and what I didn't receive, and what they are receiving now, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And they don't understand it. They're like, 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 what are you doing? Like, get off of me. Or like, yeah, I'm like, oh, like I wanted
Yeah.
to do my daughter's hair for homecoming and help her get ready. And she was just like, I got it. I don't need
Yeah.
you to comb my hair. I was like, I just want to, but she didn't understand. Like this, like this was like a really big thing for me because
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience, but so I kind of have to be like, okay, well, they're being their teenage selves, and so that
Yeah. Yeah. We've heard actually from some of our guests who are in some, I think that self-described as the strongest. This is a misuse of feminist, I think, but people that at least consider themselves want to be incredibly independent and really want to avoid being, quote, trapped in a caregiver role, and want to kind of, I don't know what version of feminism this is, but kind of the glass ceiling has, quote unquote, been broken, even though it in many ways has not been. My my duty in some ways as a woman is to go forth and take advantage of those opportunities, have the big job, make the big money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's those guests that talk a lot about how having a child ultimately was the most, you use the word healing. There's a lot of sort of coming back to themselves and recovering themselves that they talk about, of who they not necessarily fully, not they truly are, but sort of like a filling in some gaps. And I think it's really interesting in this world where we're trying to be like, they're tradwives and they're like workers. It's actually, I think, as always, it's much more complicated, and there's a lot in between, and there's a lot in some ways to learn from all of these, the false binary, um ideas of what it is to be a human that happens to have children. But I love hearing that that has been your experience. I think it's important for people to hear that story too. Um, how did having kids, what was it like compared to what you were anticipating? Because it's no small potatoes to be like, I'm going to have children in any way. To raise children solo is incredibly hard. And in America, where we don't do anything to make it remotely easy, um, what was the reality versus expectation? And how did you like maybe more than duct tape it together? Like, I don't know. There are a lot of hours outside of, you know, there are a lot of hours to cover. I'm just curious how you put the puzzle together.
Well, can I just say this? I don't know if you can say this on, your podcast, but it was a shit
Yeah, yeah,
show.
yeah.
It was a shit
Yes.
show from the very beginning. I
Yeah.
love being pregnant. I had a really wonderful pregnancy. But I still was working, running this research center, had a lot of obligations. I was teaching, I was a professor, and 2 days after I gave birth, two twins, I was teaching my graduate course because I didn't have adequate maternity leave. In fact, there was no maternity leave. It was a combination of sick leave and vacation time at
Yeah.
one of the, premier universities in the country. And I I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know that, for example, in New York, you're supposed to be filling out childcare applications while you're pregnant. And so when I got off
Oh, right.
maternity,
Yes.
when I came from maternity leave, I was like, so where do I find childcare? And people are like, are you nuts?
Yeah.
And but my grandmother, again, you always get what you need. My grandmother, who lived across the country, she was like 70s.
Mm-hmm.
She came for 18 months and stayed with me
Oh.
to take care of my twins. I thought she was only going to stay for like a week or 2 weeks when she
Yeah.
offered. She stayed for 10. I couldn't have gone back to work without her support and her help.
Yeah.
So it was a shit show. I mean, it's two babies. It's not one. I had
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
idea. I'm like, just don't cry at the same time. And but it is, there was a steep learning curve. But it was amazing. It's like, I mean, now when they're 16 now, I can't believe it. I'm like, oh my God, they're 16. They are like human beings, and we had really interesting conversations, and they make me laugh. And my daughters, I'm like, is that me? Is that mini me?
Yeah.
So it's great. So, but it was a shit show.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
In that chit show, I'm curious. We talk a lot about identity. I'm curious how your sense of who you are maybe shifted and evolved as you had these kids, and then tried to go quote back to work and as much as we can, and like how where did Nicole live as these all these things were happening?
Well, it was so crazy because when I went back to work, I tried to go back in the same way that I left, right? So I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to work late nights. I was wondering how come things weren't getting done. Like I was like, you used to be so efficient. You used to get so much done. I was still trying to go to the gym because I wanted to snap back, and I
Mm-hmm.
was placing all this pressure on myself, and one small thing, one cold, one daycare closing would like throw my whole like life or day
Yeah.
into disarray. And so when they were like 4.5, I sort of off ramped and said, I need to figure out a life where that is not the case, where I'm
Mm.
just constantly going, um, going. And and I didn't go back into like a high powered job until I think they were like 7. By high powered, I
Mm.
mean, I was still a professor doing a lot of interesting things, but I really had to shift. And so when I think about my identity, um, I want to say that motherhood and me being a single mother by choice is one of my core identities, but it is not the primary identity.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I have a lot of mom friends, and the mom friends that I have are not the mom friends where like sorry, this is gonna be
They're
bad.
not mommy moms.
They're
I
not
say it all
mommy
the
moms.
time.
They're not like the ones I like, are
Yeah.
like talking about their kids 24/7. I was like, I'm not
Right.
coming to drinks to talk about my kids. Like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
The mom cuts, the mom. I'm like, why? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so, not that there's anything wrong with it. Again, like you said, it's not.
Yeah.
It's by it's the
Yeah.
range, but my career is really important to me. My work is really important to me, my passion. And I think it's really important for my kids to see that I have passions, that I'm a woman in the world. I'm living my life on my own terms because it gives them permission to do so.
Yeah.
And that I'm not like self-sacrificing and like, oh my God, I have to do this, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's like I said, it's an identity, one of my identities, but it is not my primary overriding identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That resonates with me a ton. How did having kids affect the focus areas of your work? Because it's interesting, like, currently, helping women succeed, find power, be more influential. Absolutely, all sorts of support systems that mothers lack kind of undermine all of that. So I'm curious if was that an interest of yours before you had kids in the same way, or how did that like light a fire, perhaps?
So before I had children, I've always been a gender advocate. I've worked in women's space. I worked at a shelter for abused women. So this has been like my lane.
Mm-hmm.
I think after I had kids, especially when I was like searching for childcare, I was like, what the hell is going on? How come mothers aren't rising up? This is insane in terms
Yeah.
of the cost. And and I was just like, it's because we figured out somehow and nobody cares and
Yeah.
so when I started doing more policy advocacy and thinking about um women's economic security. So it's the pay gap, paid sick leave, childcare. Those are all issues that were impacting me very acutely when I was a mother, because I remember
Mm-hmm.
asking for a raise after I had the kids and being told no. So
Yeah.
I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this really, I'm going to look on Craigslist for care.
Yeah.
Actually, I did actually. And,
Yes.
and so I think motherhood has made those issues more acute, and then obviously the pandemic did as well.
Yep.
But I've had more power in my work and a bigger voice, and so I've been able to champion those issues in a different way,
Mm.
in a more systemic way and structural way. And so it's not just about me because I actually don't need childcare anymore.
Yeah. Right.
But I know that especially for working women and mothers, like childcare is critical and essential. So it's still
Yeah.
a part of the work that I continue to do and write about.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Very eloquently. Yeah. I also existential question, but I think, and it goes back to this like identity piece, and we happen to be mothers. I think of it more as like a verb. I mother. I'm not necessarily defined by that. Um, but for folks that are kind of pulled in these different directions of kind of wanting to show up in a work setting, be my individual self, be effective, be efficient, be influential, be powerful in a generous way, and then also want to raise productive, good kids. I feel like and this has come more and more through more interviews I do, where I'm like, are we trying to get women to do something that they actually can't? Like I was at Google for 12 years. Google is, by American standards, one of the most generous companies in terms of like family support systems, I would say, but still not enough. And I'm trying to figure out whether should women that find themselves sort of on the outside of slightly outside power, should the message be get back in there and find your way to the top so that you have the power stick? Or is it we actually you need to find and build your own way outside of it? I'm just trying to, let's kind of like round peg square hole situation. And I'm not sure how we're supposed to proceed. Because it seems like we're a little bit screwed either way. So how do we get up in the morning? I don't know.
Again, I'm sure we can like have a drink and tell these like
Yeah.
horrible stories about like work. um,
Yes.
and for me, what I wish I would have known earlier is that like it doesn't have to be that way. Like you don't
Mm.
have to put so much pressure on yourself. Like it's not you, it's the system that's broken, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
And it's not meant for you to succeed in it.
Right.
And we have been told that like you said, okay, well, if you're going to work, fine, you can work, but we're not going to make it easy for you. We're not going to do anything to
Yeah.
accommodate it. You're still going to have motherhood. You're still going to have to pick your kids up. School's still going to get out at 3 o'clock, and
Mhm.
so yeah, fine, work, but who cares? And if you fail, it'll
Right.
be your fault. And
Yep.
I wish we knew that like it's not our fault. It's not, it wasn't built for us. The system was not
Mhm.
built for us. So do the hell what you want to do.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do in this system because um economically, you know, you need money to take care of yourself, and you need it, for a middle class living, or like to you have to earn a certain amount of income. And so again, if you're trying to do all those things at once, you're doing it, yes, for your family, but you're doing it for your survival, for
Mhm.
to get your basic needs met. And so for me, what I've learned, and I think probably what you've learned, is that like, even if you get to the top, you'll make so many sacrifices to get there that
Mhm.
in the end, it might not be worth it. And I know for
Mhm.
me, it wasn't. I
Yeah.
just want to say that. And the last thing I'll say is that like, hey, it's so much. I mean, like in a day, in a week, like I dropped the ball. Something didn't happen. I'm like, my son will come home from something and he was like, "Oh, but yeah, I had a game." I was like, "You had a game?" So, and
Yeah.
hey, but here's a hug, and how did it go? And or so I don't sweat the small stuff, and that seems like such a cliche, but like
Mhm.
it's gonna be all right. I mean, now they're 16, they're still alive, they're thriving, I didn't,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and they're gonna be on somebody's couch for something. So,
Yeah.
hey, so
Yeah.
just giving myself permission to be. And like I think, which I think is we don't, as mothers, we get told so many things. And I know we mentioned trad wives, I think, and it's not trad wives per se, but it's this idea that there's a right way to mother, and there's
Yeah.
also a right way to be to have a career as a
Mhm.
woman. And I think what I know now is that there's so many different ways. And um the unfortunate thing is that society doesn't value those many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot, and you have this beautiful women's power and influence index. I was thinking about kind of another theme of among many very wise guests, yourself included, is ultimately kind of getting to this place where they define power for themselves. And I think that's both. I can't figure out if that's yet, women yet again accommodating a system and trying to find a way to, um, is that a reclaiming of power, or is that an acceptance of we might never have power the way that society values power? um, but I'm curious how that shows up. Like, what is power to you? And if that aligns with the power index, which I was glad to see that I'm in Massachusetts, so I
Yeah,
was glad
you
to see
guys are
that,
doing
and
great.
DC is
Yeah,
on
you
there
guys
too.
are doing great.
Um,
We're doing great.
so maybe that's why I'm sitting here asking questions.
We're doing great.
But yeah, how do you think about power?
So when I think about power for myself, personal power,
Hmm.
I think for me, power is living my life on my own terms. Now that's
Hmm.
has
Yeah.
doesn't really, shake out when we think about how power gets defined in our society. Power in our society is very capitalistic, very material. It's very masculine,
Yeah.
actually. Even when women climb the corporate ladder, they are performing masculinity in a particular way. They're not talking about being a mother because they can't. And so you have to give up so much of yourself in those spaces when you're seeking a very male identified kind of power.
Hmm.
Um, and power is opting out of that and thinking about what power means to you and on your own terms and defining it for yourself. And I think that's hard to do in a society where power looks a particular way and that people tell you you need it. In order to be
Yeah.
successful, in order to have a good life, you need power. And so, the question I would ask is like, well, what kind of power? And why is that the only kind of power that we value in our society? Mothers are really
Hmm.
powerful, actually
Yeah.
the most powerful. I mean, you think about how your kids are like, tell me what to do, you know,
Yes.
um, but we don't see that as power. We don't value mothers as powerful people or the way that they orchestrate their lives as something powerful, but it really
Hmm.
is. So it really is about the misalignment between what we understand as power and know to be power and what society believes that it is.
Yes. Beautiful. And still being able to get up in the morning.
So bringing it, but
Yeah.
we're doing it. I mean, I think that, you know, Sarah, for you, for me, and I've written about this before. I said, these are, we've left and you have forged a life on your own that makes sense for you and so have I.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think we should have to. I think
Yes.
those are it's a false choice. It's like, oh, I chose this. I was like, but I chose it because there was no other option. And so and that shouldn't be the case. And I think we should talk more about these like constrained choices that women have to make in a system, like I said, not built for them and where power looks a particular way.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It makes me emotional because I think also we make, I don't know if I didn't realize even to myself, I I chose to forge this other path to try to be brave and build my own thing, which is always something that I was curious about. And it is confusing. It's not, maybe in some cases it's very black and white, and others it's not, but it's the more subtle ways where, again, I will say always, I think Google's, for me, it was a wonderful place to work, but there are ways that even now that I'm out of it, subconsciously, that the path, the next step, the next thing, progress wasn't quite accessible to me. I think not exclusively because of my childcare, like the responsibilities of raising the rest of my family. Um, but it's really important to see the more subtle ways that we're being encouraged to make a choice that is our own, quote unquote, that aren't really our choice. And yeah, I want to figure out how to raise, because I think the mother caregiving challenge is there are a million paper cuts. I feel like it's really hard for people to know what to latch onto, to say that it's not working, which I think in your case where you were like, when your kids were young and you were like, childcare is so fucking expensive. Like, why isn't everyone raising up and saying like, this isn't okay? And I think we still have that like people are clamoring, but it's a lot of, I was thinking about Future Forward Women, and there's so many organizations out there that are trying to raise an alarm bell about this fundamental thing that theoretically we all know needs to be better. And yet we can't quite latch on to a singular reason to make that change. Um, and I feel it in my own little version of my life, and I think we see it at scale too. It's really hard.
It's really
Um,
hard, but it's not like rocket science. Like the reason why we don't have universal childcare is because of men. Excuse me. I'm not,
mm-hmm,
like their
mm-hmm,
legislators, like we make the case, like all these, like you said, all these organizations are like economically, it's good for the economy, or it's the
mm-hmm,
GDP goes up, labor force participation, like the data, the stats, the stories,
mm-hmm.
and it gets up to the line and it gets vetoed, it doesn't pass. And when this is what I mean about power and influence and
Yeah.
work our future for women. And people ask like, well, why didn't it pass? And they want an autopsy. I said, it's quite simple. We don't have enough power. Like we don't have enough power in Congress to pass something that we know we all need and would all
Mm-hmm.
benefit from, including
Mm-hmm.
men. But
Mm-hmm.
men are the ones who are voting no. So,
Mm-hmm.
because they're the majority of people in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
there's a disconnect because they also are, have children.
Mm-hmm.
And so um that's, again, these are all choices.
Mm-hmm.
And they are connected to, power
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
these interesting ways.
Totally. I am always kind of shocked at how few and shocked and also not surprised, given sort of the demands of that profession, how few mothers there are in Congress in general, let alone women. Um, so yeah. Um, okay, I wanted to kind of close with a question I've been desperate to ask you because we ask most of our guests this question about having it all, which is built off of Anne Marie Slaughter's point of view, and I gather that she's on your board. So I was curious, maybe having a more insider sense of what the heck this concept is about. But um, do you think about having it all, and how might you define it all? And what does Anne Marie think about what she stated?
You know, I have written about this idea of having it all and
Mm-hmm.
actually say that if that was never women's goal. Like never, like women never said I want to have it all. Like
Mm-hmm.
nobody, and said like by all we mean working around the clock, taking care of children and partners and looking good. Like no, we never said that. Like nobody ever
Yeah.
said that, but that's how the debate got framed. And somehow we've been like, can I have it all? Can I not have it all?
Mm-hmm.
That was it was like a super setup. So it was just never true. And I think even, Anne Marie Slaughter, Sheryl Sandberg, and some others have sort of walked it back and said, like, that's actually not true. And I'm sorry for saying
Mm-hmm.
that and telling women to go have it all. So
Yeah.
I think uh, having it all was, I don't know who came up with that. And I can guarantee it wasn't a woman. I can tell you it
Yeah.
wasn't a woman. Because that's not what we want. If you ask women what they want a partner who supports them and does,
Mm-hmm.
equal labor, inside and outside of the home, who is kind, who they want, universal childcare. They want a spa day. They want to be able to brunch with their friends. They want a
Mm-hmm.
career that's meaningful to them. And they also don't want to be held to some impossible standards. And can wear sweats sometimes and yoga pants all the time.
Yes.
So that's, do you ask me about having it all? That's what I want, and
I
and
love
not
that.
to be in a, rush hour commute. So
Yes.
so that's what having it all means to me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a better list, a better
I
description. I
better.
totally agree. Yes. We should actually ask all of our guests to list out their characteristics and get that out in the world. Um, okay, if you have 3 minutes for like rapid fire questions, does that work for you?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, really quickies. But we ask every guest these, and it's interesting to see the comparison of their answers. But so if you could go back to your new mom self, the very early days of the shit show, is there anything that you would tell her now, knowing what you know?
I would say you're doing it perfect. You're
Mm.
doing it perfect. Like, keep going. You're doing it
Yeah.
perfect. Like, you know, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. And so
Yeah.
I would say, like, don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing perfect.
I love that.
Doing it perfect.
Yes. Okay, here's a platform opportunity. If you could go back, and is there anything that would have made your journey through motherhood thus far any easier? Anything come to mind?
Any easier? I mean, in the early days, I think better childcare and just more flexibility at work would have been awesome and great. That's it. That's all I would
Yeah.
actually, I
Right.
mean, higher income, I'm missing a,
Yeah.
40 cents on the dollar almost. So I would,
Yep.
so I think that would be, yeah, equal pay for
Yeah.
equal work, a little childcare, and a little vacay,
Yeah.
without my
Yes.
kids. So
I love it. I love it.
without,
I love it.
um,
Okay, well, speaking of those kids, who we might go on a vacation without, but they might one day listen to this. Is there anything that you'd want to say to them?
oh, I mean, I say it to them all the time. I say that they're the best things that ever happened to me. And I'm so happy and grateful for them. And I love who they are in the world. So, but I tell them that often. And so if they hear this, they'll, and they also know that it was a shit show in the beginning. So, but we've just had such a great time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I really, really think it's so important to see these women because often we're like, well, people are figuring it out, so it's okay. But imagine like to see these incredibly impressive, successful women who are also carrying all these things and how much easier and better and less stressful life could have been. Just to see how much they carry. And sometimes we make it look easy. It doesn't mean it is. So I really, really appreciate everything you had to say and the honesty. And thank you for leading in all the ways that you are and trying to get us more power and influence. Very impressive. So thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sarah. Thanks for having me and thanks for this great conversation. I, haven't thought about many of these things in a while, so it was really good to
Yeah.
reflect.
Yes. Now go to that yoga class.
I know. I'm gotta squeeze it in, fit it in.
Yes. Yes. So again, yet another story of a woman, a mother, finding a way to do it anyway, despite complete lack of support. Let me call V my main source of support. Let's give her a call. V, hello.
Hello. How you doing?
I want to know how anyone else answers the phone. I feel like no one calls me on the phone anymore, so I don't really know what's normal for people to say.
That's true. Yeah, I feel like I talk to the same like 5 people, and that includes like you, my dad,
I'm sure your daddy has his
sister.
He goes,
He goes, he goes, what's up? Like, from that, do you remember that commercial? Yeah. That's like our thing. But
yeah, something like that.
something like that. So that's what we always do when we call each other.
My dad always answers saying like as being surprised because we talk so big. Sarah? I really like on purpose, but that is the tone that's shared. Anyway, so did these. I just to Dr. Nicole Mason, Dr. PhD doctor, and she's wonderful. One thing that we talked about but could talk about endlessly is that so she came from really rough poverty background in LA, a little bit of Las Vegas mixed in, kind of like against all odds, as it always is. Found her way out of that, got herself into Howard University with like full merit based scholarship. Ended up getting PhD, all in like poli sci and government stuff, and then has committed her life thus far to working in areas in a nonprofit capacity around dealing with issues of gender and racial equity and generally trying to like bring a little bit more justice into the world. And which she first was very specifically wanted to say that she never necessarily had a very specific plan. She had ideas along the way, but not a specific end goal. And part of this was so she wrote this very tender, intimate book called Born Bright that's about her experience and growing up poor essentially and finding her way to where she is today. And in the early parts of that book, she talks about a teacher when she was in like grade school asking her, so you're really smart, like what do you want to do with your life? And she says really it's I don't know, hard thing to hear and important to hear, but she's like, when you're poor, your vision of what you could be or want to be is, as she describes it, like so limited and even just geographically small. So it's kind of like, oh, I'll work at the shop on the corner kind of thing. And that she noticed that with greater privilege and economic wealth comes a greater vantage point and idea of like what you could be. And I
Sure.
so interesting. And then so she talked about how it wasn't clear along the way what she wanted to be, but I think as she kind of, I don't even want to call it a ladder, but made her way up in different parts of society, had a different sense of what she wanted to be and what she could be. If anything, early days, she said she wanted to be a writer and to help people, which I thought.
Yeah.
And then, so she's doing all this badass stuff. And then she decides in her 30s that she wants to be a mother. Well, before that, she was like, what does a full life look to me? And within that fullness, that was maybe a sketch of things. She was like, it did include being a mother. And she decided at 30, she didn't have a partner. She also was like, the clock is ticking. She decided to have kids on her own and through IVF and wound up first round getting pregnant with twins.
Terrifying.
And was like, it was a shit show. And just had no, I think a specific anecdote that everyone will get was in terms of, I don't know, just the lack of support that exists in America in all ways around having children was for her, she had the kids. And then when it was time to go back to work, which is a very limited maternity leave, she was like, okay, so what do I do let me sign up for daycares. And of course, by then it was like you needed to be on wait lists for like years to get. And she said her grandmother came to stay with her for like 18 months. Originally we had the weeks, and then it turned to 18 months. And just we've heard this story in other ways too, but like just the parents or parent figures, family that shows up
Yes.
to bridge the gap that shouldn't be a gap. What was the other thing that she talked about? Oh, so then I was like, did this impact your sense of like what your causes were, so to speak? And she was like, absolutely. Once she had her own experience with the lack of childcare specifically, she's like, that became so much more clear to me as such a barrier to quote entry for parents, mothers who are trying to like crush it, not for like ego reasons, but just want to have a meaningful career and have be a meaningful parent to their kids.
Yeah.
Just how that opportunity that like doesn't it's really hard to do that. She kept saying how she's written a lot about this. She's like fairly um over the years been in a lot of like media publications, but and talking about things like in the pandemic, who really lost out, it was women. And she called it a she session, which became a thing. Um, and that how we're just operating in a system that wasn't built for us. And so it's this idea of like, sure, go off and like try to have a big career, like good luck, but like you're not going to get any foundations or help to like make that real when work ends at 5:30 and school ends at 2:20 or whatever, depending on our day. So I think it's really this, I don't know, story of her trying to ac- figure out how to gain power and influence in a society that defines that in a very specific way, and then reaching a place where she sort of sees it for what it is and wants to redefine it for herself to be deep about it.
Yeah. Damn.
But yeah, and it's like an incredible. I mean, I cannot fathom what it's like. I can only obviously in theory. I have such a privileged background that it's like hard to really understand that.
Yep.
But one of the I didn't read this to her, but an excerpt from her book, for example, was like she says, our cupboards, this is growing up, our cupboards were bare. The most I could find was a stale box of taco shells on the back shelf and a lone bottle of ketchup in the refrigerator. At the start of the month, the fridge and shelves overflowed with milk, cereal, chicken, grits, Oreo cookies, and fresh fruit. However, by the end of the month, we ate rice and butter at nearly every meal and drank sugar water. My mother had long since quit her job at a convalescent home, changing bedpans, washing laundry, mopping floors, and serving food because the next door neighbor could no longer take care of my brother. After she and my father split, her main source of income was, quote, the county, as she called public assistance. We survived on the once monthly checks that arrived in the mail and on food stamps. It's crazy. Yeah, I just can't, I can't, people need to understand that that's a real thing. And I think one thing, we didn't talk about it in our interview, but one thing that she has talked about publicly a lot was this idea that, I don't know, I want to say we've gotten better at this, but the idea that being poor is your fault, quote unquote, and that obviously it's not.
Yep. Turns out, actually.
That there are systems in place that keep people in those positions because it's to take advantage of the people at the top. Um, so anyway, it was a tough interview. Well, tough is the wrong word. There were so many things I wanted to to her about because her background is relevant to like the whole premise of the mothers, but then also her personal story is like so also significant to the whole premise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the reality that it's really hard. And we kept talking about like it's really, really hard and like we get the big picture and the existential questions, but we also need to get up in the morning and feed ourselves. So like how do we do that?
Yes, make space for both of those things, like still be functioning and question and hold things, I don't know, society accountable and change things.
Yes.
Uh,
Um, yeah. So when I told her we've already gotten into existential things, but I was like, I just have this I feel like the more of the interviews that we do and the more I kind of process like what are we trying to make of this? Like what is the story? What are the lessons here?
mhm.
And some of it is like getting a better sense of how these women who are doing really high impact work and also are raising children, like sort of like how do they think about it? How do they experience that? And like maybe a degree of tactics. And part of that is so that others can have a model. But then I'm also like, is the system, are we trying to give people ideas and tricks for how to like exist in a system that they can't exist in happily?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we talked about the idea of choosing. So it's like, do you find a way to like sustain a life that's sustainable in the workplace,
Mm.
in the traditional corporate, whatever workplace? Or
Mhm.
you build something outside of that. And then the idea that the people that go to build something outside of that, questioning whether that's a choice.
Mm.
And in her mind, she was like,
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, sure. It's a choice out of necessity, which doesn't really make it a choice. It makes it a that is made for you. This is what you have to do.
exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like how does framing and identifying that impact the action of actually doing it? By saying it's a choice, it's like, oh, it's empowering and yada yada. But by saying it's just something that I have to do, does that make it like less empowering? Or what is the pressure and the strain on yourself to like actually get it done?
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make sense? I don't know how.
Yeah.
Like, that's so interesting. I guess I haven't really thought of that
Yeah.
ever before. Of like, if you're doing it out of necessity, that kind of totally shifts the
Right. Yeah. I
Huh.
feel like Instagram's full of all of these posts around. I shouldn't reference Instagram, but there are a lot of people that are like modeling. I left insert the blank corporate company, and now these are women, mothers. Yeah, and I built. Typically, it's a consulting or a coaching practice, and now my life is so free. And I
Yeah.
feel like
Right.
it's so interesting. Is it about? Well, first, I'm annoyed by I don't know the messaging. Just I hate Instagram. But also,
No.
what it is, it sort of is that to be celebrated? Are we on the outside building something that could become big and replace the alternative? Or are we out here kind of just like scraping by? And are the people
Yeah.
how much harder in a certain way
Mhm.
it is to build sustainable
From you scratch.
on the outside?
Ye- Yes, 100%.
Not
Is
that it's
it
impossible, but that you're starting from zero with no.
Yep.
I don't know. It just made me be like. I think we talked about this in an early episode. Like, where is my agency? Have I made choices of my own?
Shit, god damn it.
Yeah. Anyway, so we found ourselves in a quagmire.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That I'm very hung up on this now of like leaving. You see all of these posts. I mean, Instagram, yes, but also like on LinkedIn too, of these women moms who are like, hey, the system didn't work for me, so I had to leave in order to like create something that did, but also how easily, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not replicable. That's not a word. Um, how easy is it for other people to do that? Like it's arguably so much harder to do that than to just have a fucking job
Yeah.
in a system
Right.
with a business and everything that already works.
Yep.
Like that you don't have to like create everything for.
Yep.
Like to be the HR and the manager and the marketer and all, why can't we just change the system
Right.
to actually work for everybody if this is an issue that everybody is having? Like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I know. And then the classic, like, well, does this then make it seem like everyone's finding a way anyway? Like the classic,
Yeah.
I feel like it's most naturally falls on like the lack of, systemic childcare. This seems only associated with mothers. Of course, fathers and any former parent should be a part of that. But this idea of, well, they're kind of finding their way anyway. So why do we need to help them?
Because it doesn't have to be so hard.
Right. Right. And then they're like, well, it's also hard for the guy. I don't know. It's just,
Oh, interesting. Dang. All right.
so future forward women will figure it out. But good news is there's a power and influence index on there.
Okay.
This new organization has like backed the research for and conducted the research, largely trying to figure out where by state where women have most power and influence. Massachusetts did a really
Hell yeah. Of
um,
course we did. I love that for us.
and it looked at indicators such as number of women on like in government positions and number average sort of income for women and then sort of healthcare support for women. So we're living in the right place.
I love that press and everyone should move here. I know. I just want to say, yeah, and actually,
Wait, so this is supposed to be good? Okay, cool.
how's everyone else doing? It's just like just checking in.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right.
I know.
Dang.
What a time.
Yeah, it is a time. It's definitely a time.
But God, can you imagine children solo?
Wins.
Like I
married never ran it.
again.
No.
They're now teenagers and oh, this was the other thing I should pass along too. She, like some of our other guests, I think of Ruthie Ackerman, author, about this. A lot of our guests who self-identify as like, or present as very independent, I can do it myself women, and who don't want to, quote, fall into a caregiving like trap. And
Yeah.
therefore associate mother and mothering and becoming a mother with sort of this like, hmm, what's the right word? A loss of self-identity, a loss of independence, a loss of all these things that are so important to who they think they are.
Yeah.
End up having kids in all of these cases by choice, ultimately. Like it becomes what they want
Right.
to do. And they then find such healing through the experience of mothering. Like Nicole talked a lot about how it was really healing and therapeutic for her to have an opportunity to mother her children in the way that she wasn't mothered, essentially.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's all.
I just imagine like that is so beautiful. And I can't imagine also the immense pressure or fear of failure, right? Of like, there's an opportunity for so much healing and growth and like, oh, I want to give my family and my kids all the things that I didn't have. And like, what happens if I can't? Like, and like, what happens if I don't know, what is enough, right? Like I want it to be better than what I had, but like what is the standard or the expectation and how do you know like when enough is enough or when good was good, you know? I think
Yeah,
that's got to be hard.
totally. Totally. Oh,
Damn, but she's crushing it. Hell yeah.
finding her way. Such an achievement just to her whole life is an achievement, I think.
To be exactly well, like just existing as she is. Yeah. So good for you. Aw,
So
I love it.
thank you, Nicole, for sharing your wisdom and story.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right. What sorts of average joy do we have on our docket?
My joy today is that it's like kind of yucky and like beginning to feel like actual winter today and gross out. And I feel incredibly cozy and happy in my home. It's decorated for the holidays and it feels comfy and I feel safe and really content here. And that feels good. So it's just like a simple one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No way. So
I
we're
have my
recording this
Christmas
in
tree.
December, early December, forever.
Oh, yeah.
That's when it will come out.
Sorry, everybody.
No, it's
It is. I have paper chains and paper stars and mushrooms and stockings and trees and smelly things, and it just feels really nice. So I feel good in my place.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. What is your joy?
Now, I mean, currently I'm looking up above my screen where I have a picture drawn by our 4-year-old, and it has a lot of long arms. She's only drawing these pictures and quote cards because she folds them in half and gives them to me. She's like, I made you a card, Mom.
Oh,
And so that's bringing me joy. Just so sweet. Yeah. But my other joy is that we hosted friends, but like I've talked about,
yeah.
we have a mission to invest in our friendships more. And I feel like we've been
Yes.
doing that and it has been really nice.
Hell yes. What did you guys do?
We just cozied up by the fire here. Some Bloody Marys. It's like
I
a,
love it.
yeah. And our kids get along with their kids, which is awesome.
Fantastic.
Like I feel like that becomes the hardest. Like not only do you need, ideally you and partner, if there is one, need to like enjoy the others. And then also icing on the cake, but also seemingly necessary is having the kids like each other. And they do.
That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay. I love that for you.
I know. So go invest in those friends, even when we're tired, even when it feels like it might be nicer to turn on Stranger Things, which I have been watching, and that is a joy.
I've heard.
It's good. When I was like, I don't know, I'm over this. And then I started watching it and I was like, maybe I'm not.
I'm not over this. I love this.
Yeah.
Aw.
Okay, cool. Well,
Yay.
you're my joy, V. Let's be honest.
Love you. You're my joy, always. I love giggling on the phone with you. Love hearing you talk. You're great.
Isn't my deep voice in the microphone?
No, it's so good. It's so calming and so, I don't know, so legit. Did I tell you? Keep this in so that you can, everyone can know how legit and real of a podcaster you are. But my partner was listening to a podcast the other day, and then somehow like the mothers came on like next, just like by default. I don't know if it was like in his queue or something. And honestly, for a second, I was like, "Oh, like when you started talking, it sounded so real that I didn't recognize it. Like, and then I was like, "What is this?" And then I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "That's Sarah." And my partner was like, "No, she has a fantastic podcast voice." It was so unexpected that I didn't like even recognize it. And then I was like, "Damn, that sounds good." So just know. Yeah, it really threw me off guard. I was like, "Oh my God." Like when I wasn't expecting, I was like, "Oh, what is this?" So you're real.
That's my joy. I'm going to carry that through the week.
Yeah, you should.
I will. I will.
Well,
Thank you, everybody, for listening to my deep woe.
not even.
All right. Whatever.
I know, truly. Yeah, the next few weeks are tough, but we got this.
I know. Anyway, we got it. We got it. All right. I love you the most.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and we can reach even more rock stars like you. The Mothers is a production of Backline Media, shining a light on those who carry the team.